Hello, everyone. So I'm here to just preview the game real quick. And offensively, well, Green Bay, they are 1-0, but offensively, they are 31st in total offense as of right now at 213, 28th in passing yards at 166. They're tied 27th in sacks allowed at 5, 27th in rushing yards with only 47, 31st in yards per carry at 2.1, 31st in third down percentage at 17, and 29th in points per game at 10. Defensively, fifth in total defense at 254, 10th in passing yards allowed, allowing only 208 last week, and they're tied second in sacks with 5. They are fifth in rushing yards allowed with only 46 of them, and they are tied eighth in yards per carry allowed at 3.1. They are tied fourth in third down percentage defensively at 20, and tied first in points per game at 3. So obviously, this is only a 1 week total, but it's kind of just telling you statistically of what was achieved last week for Green Bay. The injury report is as follows: Oren Burks, he's out with a chest. Darius Shepard is a wide receiver. He's out with a hamstring. I'm going to pronounce this name wrong. I am wholeheartedly expecting this. Kadar Hallman, corner. He is questionable with a neck. And the big one is David Bakhtiari, who is questionable with a back. And he did not practice. I think it was Wednesday, but he was a limited participant all the other days. So I would anticipate him playing. Minnesota, also a 1-0 team as of right now. 26th in total offense at 269, 32nd in passing yards at 97, tied for fourth in sacks allowed with only one of them, and fourth in rushing yards at 172. So they are 14th in yards per carry at 4.5, and they are tied 10th in third down percentage at an even 50%, and tied 11th in points per game at 28. Defensively, 13th in total defense, allowing 345 yards last week, 18th in passing yards, allowed at 272. They are tied for 7th in sacks with 4, and 9th in rushing yards allowed, with only allowing 73 of them, and tied 16th in yards per carry at 4.3, tied 6th in third down percentage at 25%, 5th in points per game allowed at 12. Now, Minnesota's injury report is possibly a little bit worse. And Mackenzie Alexander, he's out with a dislocated elbow. I think everyone anticipated that. Mike Hughes, doubtful with a knee injury, but was a full participant in practice on Friday. And Mark Fields is questionable with a groin. Gideon, questionable with a groin as well. And Gideon only had one limited practice the entire week, otherwise did not practice. So I would expect to see some Eric Wilson out there this week, which I don't know if that's really that big of a deal given that, you know, Gideon really only plays about 30 to 35% of the snaps at most. So I'm not sure how big of a deal that would be. So keys, I would say, of things of sorts. So I think you offensively you need to stick with the run game. Chicago only ran 15 times last week and kind of abandoned it right after that, and it could really chew the clock and kind of keep number 12 off the field. I think that would be the hope, to have things like that be working in your favor. So, and the play action's already set up from last week. They only have on this offense the preseason and last week. So I think this is already set up with, a play action thing. I would like to see it the first play where you might actually be able to take a play action shot immediately, potentially, because they might sell out just to stop the run based on how last week went. And in the preseason, even, we were capable of running the ball pretty well. And given the fact that it's only week 1, it's a new offense, I think both teams, it's a new offense for both teams. I think they're going to be going back and maybe looking at some of the preseason things that they did, even though it's more vanilla things, and they may not do any of it, just how it is this early in the year. And I do think this is likely going to be a low-scoring game, fairly low scoring. So obviously turnovers are a no-go in any game, but I think in a game like this, they are only magnified, because not only is it a division game, it's going to be a game where points might be at a premium, don't want to give your opponent a hand up with good field position. And something that might be a slight edge to them is the fact that they only threw 10 times. I know a lot of media, pundit people, experts, analysts, whatever you want to call them, they kind of look at this and be like, oh, they're just going back to 1973 and this is just how they're going to be. I think it was more a thing of game flow. And the fact that it's only been 10 passing plays, they haven't really seen the real passing offense. It is a new offense. So that might be a somewhat of an edge of things. And just as a player versus player thing, Kenny Clark might be the key to the whole game, whether or not it's Green Bay or Minnesota winning the game. Kenny Clark might be the one key. If we can't block him, we can't run. If we can't run, then we got problems because then their pass rushers can just pin their ears back, and we kind of know how that works with Minnesota. That's not a good thing. So they need to find a way to block Kenny Clark, which is harder said than done since they struggled with Grady Jarrett. And although Grady Jarrett's probably just he's more of an athlete, I would say, where Kenny Clark brings a lot more power, which could be a little bit more concerning with this line, as we do have smaller offensive linemen due to that zone running system of things. So Garrett Bradbury on Kenny Clark isn't something I'm really looking forward to. And Elflein also is questionable in this game. I forgot to put him down there, but he's already banged up and he didn't play well last week. So I'm not really looking forward to either of those two going after Kenny Clark, but hopefully the combination of the two can help this. It's a good thing they don't have Mike Daniels anymore because that would really mess us up. Defensively, they do run a very similar scheme to Minnesota. So I would expect for them to stop the run first and avoid those play action boots, and they're going to want to get it to those backs in space. That's going to be another thing that I'm sure you'll see in common with Minnesota and Green Bay this week, where those backs will be given an opportunity in space against linebackers. So be on alert for like screens and things of that nature, whether that be to the backs or wide receivers. It's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff with all these West Coast things, more under center, probably for Aaron Rodgers than we're used to seeing. And I don't know, like practicing against Kubiak and our offense probably does help a little bit as it does with theirs. And we do also have familiarity on each side, I guess, because Kirk might be able to help with what LaFleur might like because they work together. So did Mannion. Mannion was also with LaFleur in Los Angeles, but at the same time, LaFleur was with both of them. So he kind of knows what they might be wanting to do. It's kind of a double-edged sword. But maybe working with them like that might actually help. And then you also have two key things I think we need to watch, which is Rhodes versus Devontae Adams. I would like him not to get a touchdown this time. It seems like he always does, but he probably will. And I do think that's one of the more key matchups. And you also have Griff versus Bakhtiari. Now, Bakhtiari is playing with a back injury, which is pretty significant when you're talking about an offensive lineman. So having him, even if he's not 100% and he's out there, I don't know how much of an edge that could be to us, but I do know having him at less than 100% is probably obviously more ideal for the Minnesota way of things, and you might want to be looking to overload that one side just because he is kind of hurt. So maybe if you make it a little bit more difficult for him, it might be harder for him to recover than maybe it would be had he not had a back injury that made him limited and didn't practice one day. And then one thing I do want to talk about, because I do know some people are going to probably talk about it, which is, yeah, Green Bay struggled last week, but it was the Bears defense. Your defense isn't necessarily as good, which might be true, but I do think they pose a different form of threat because this offense didn't look gelled. I know it was the first game of the year and it was on a Thursday night game, so things were kind of weird and routines, but still they did not look gelled whatsoever. And The real difference between Chicago and Minnesota is mostly the fronts, where Chicago will play you mostly man up and play it like that, kind of straight up. And they just kind of believe our guy is better than your guy. He's going to win. You're going to lose. That's kind of how Chicago does it. Where Minnesota's kind of been known for these more exotic blitzes, where obviously there's the double A gap. Last week, I don't know if you saw, but you had Daniil Hunter and Anthony Barr standing up on the edges, and you only had 3 down linemen. So you kind of have weird fronts. And even last year, they had somewhat of a triple A gap blitz where you had, obviously Barr and Kendricks on the outsides, and then Harrison was in the middle. If you remember that from last year, I don't think they ran that a different time that year, but they're kind of known for these more exotic packages of sorts, especially on third down. And to an offense that hasn't gelled yet, that is kind of learning it still, that could be a major problem. Although obviously we don't have the Khalil Mack, the Akeem Hicks, players like that you really worry about just completely wrecking a game. We do have a weird package of things. And special teams wise, we did lose this game last year, partially due to a certain kicker missing a lot. So Dan, if you could just, not do that, that'd be great. So prediction, I'm not confident in this prediction. I'm going to tell you that right now. I do have Minnesota winning 20-14, and like I said, not overly confident. I'm just thinking, this is my only line of thinking with this, because we don't really know if Green Bay's defense is for real or if it was just Mitchell Trubisky playing not so great, to put it lightly, or if Minnesota's offense can actually continue to, actually be a good rushing offense, given the fact that Atlanta's kind of notoriously soft. So it will be kind of interesting to see, because something's probably going to give there. But where we only have one question mark, I think Green Bay might have 2. Because once again, you can kind of make the argument like, well, Chicago kind of abandoned the run early. They kind of just became one-dimensional by themselves in that game. And Trubisky wasn't playing well, to where the Green Bay Packers defense could just look really, really good. Or the Packers defense is really, really good, and they can do that to teams. Where we kind of have the same question with our running game, where it looked really, really good, but Atlanta notoriously soft. But a really fast defense can be effective, but when you run the ball at them, that's kind of when they're at their most vulnerable. So this is kind of a find-out game. But where I think I kind of have the edge here is just defensively, we have players that are veterans who have been in this system for years. And that kind of leads me to think that's more consistency on one side of the ball, where I'm not sure we have any on Green Bay's, where you're talking about offense and defense. So that's really all I'm going off of, even though this is in Lambeau. It's early in the year, so I don't have much. But I'm thinking maybe that. This game could really go either way, but I'm going to take us just because of that. And let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Until next time, I bid you all adieu.